Tyler's life had become a series of survival games. At just 14 years old, he wandered the cold streets with nothing but a worn-out jacket and fading hope. Every day he searched for food, shelter, and something to remind him that the world wasn't all dark. But what kept him going was the memory of his mother, Emily. Her face was the one warm spot in his heart. She had disappeared years ago, leaving a gaping hole in his life that he never understood. One afternoon, as he walked through a park, something unusual caught his eye. A wallet, thick and fancy, lying by a bench. He bent down, hesitating for a moment. He could feel the weight of temptation pulling at him. "No one's watching," he whispered to himself. "Maybe this is a sign. Maybe it's my way out of this nightmare." His stomach growled in agreement, but deep down, Tyler knew better. Flipping the wallet open, he immediately saw crisp dollar bills. A sigh escaped his lips. This could solve so many of his problems. But then his fingers grazed a photograph tucked inside. His heart skipped a beat as he pulled it out. The woman in the photo was his mother. He felt the ground beneath him shift. How could this be? "Mom," Tyler whispered, eyes glued to the picture. She looked younger, full of life, just as he remembered her. But why was her photo in this wallet? His mind raced. Did this belong to someone who knew her? Is she still alive? Tyler's pulse quickened, thoughts swirling into confusion and fear. For a moment he thought about pocketing the wallet and running. But no, he needed answers. He had to find the owner. Maybe this could be the clue he had been waiting for, the one that would lead him back to her. The ID in the wallet read, Andrew Harris, a name that sounded powerful, important. Tyler swallowed hard. Andrew Harris, Tyler whispered, testing the name on his tongue. His eyes drifted from the photo back to the address on the card. It wasn't far from here. The reality of what he was about to do hit him like a wave. He had to return the wallet, but more importantly, he had to know why this man had his mother's photo. Tyler clenched the wallet tightly and started walking. With every step, he wondered if this was a step toward his destiny. The wind blew colder, but his heart burned with determination. Answers were closer than ever. Whatever lay ahead, Tyler was ready to face it. Before long, the grand estate of Andrew Harris loomed in the distance. Tyler felt his legs weaken, but there was no turning back now. Tyler stood frozen at the entrance of the grand estate, feeling more out of place than ever. The mansion's towering gates made his shabby appearance stand out even more, but he couldn't let that stop him. His mother's face was etched in his mind, urging him forward. Taking a deep breath, he pressed the intercom button. A deep voice answered, "Who is it?" My name's Tyler. I found a wallet," he stammered, his heart pounding. "It belongs to Andrew Harris. Can I see him?" There was a pause, long enough to make Tyler sweat. Then the gate buzzed, slowly creaking open. Tyler stepped inside, feeling like he was walking into another world. Every step closer to the house felt heavier. What would he say? How would this stranger react when Tyler mentioned his mother? He approached the front door, and before he could knock, it opened. A tall, sharply dressed man stood in the doorway, his eyes scanning Tyler suspiciously. "You found my wallet?" the man asked, extending a hand. Tyler gulped. This was Andrew Harris. He looked powerful, in control. Exactly the kind of person Tyler had always been wary of. "Yes, sir," Tyler replied, handing the wallet over. Andrew opened it, inspecting the contents, but his gaze quickly shifted to the photo. His face tightened as he pulled the picture out, his fingers lingering on it. Tyler's throat went dry. This was the moment he had been dreading. I know that woman," Tyler said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Andrew's eyes shot up, narrowing as if trying to read Tyler's mind. The tension between them grew thick. "She's my mother." Andrew blinked, momentarily stunned. "Your mother?" he asked, disbelief dripping from his voice. The air around them felt charged with unanswered questions, each man trying to piece together the puzzle in front of them. Tyler nodded, holding his breath as Andrew looked from the photo back to him. "Who are you?" Andrew asked, his voice low but curious. "And how do you know Emily?" Tyler's heart raced. He had come for answers, but suddenly it seemed like this meeting was about to change everything. Andrew stared at the photograph in disbelief, his hand trembling ever so slightly. The resemblance was undeniable. Tyler could see the surprise in Andrew's eyes, and it only made him more anxious. "How do you know her?" Tyler asked, though he wasn't sure if he wanted the answer. His voice was a mix of hope and fear. Andrew took a deep breath, his gaze shifting from the picture to Tyler's face. "Her name is Emily," he said, almost as if testing the words. We were close. But that was a long time ago." Tyler's heart pounded louder in his chest. "She's my mom," he said, his voice shaking. "I haven't seen her in years. She disappeared when I was little." His hands clenched into fists, trying to keep his emotions in check. He had spent so long searching for answers, and now this stranger held a piece of the puzzle. Andrew's expression softened, though confusion clouded his eyes. "Emily? She had a son?" he muttered, more to himself than to Tyler. He seemed lost in thought, his mind racing through memories Tyler couldn't see. "She never told me." "I don't understand," Tyler said, stepping forward, his desperation spilling out. "How do you know her? Why do you have her picture?" The silence between them felt unbearable. Tyler needed to know the truth, even if it hurt. Andrew hesitated, clearly struggling with what to say. "We were together, a long time ago. She was the love of my life." His words hung heavy in the air. "But something happened and we lost touch. I've been looking for her ever since." Tyler felt a mix of emotions, anger, confusion, and a strange flicker of hope. "So, what happened? Why did she leave? Where is she now?" His questions tumbled out faster than he could control. He had waited so long to find out what happened to his mother, and now he was standing on the edge of an answer. Andrew shook his head, his face grim. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've been trying to find her for years. This photo, it's all I have left of her." Tyler stared at him, realizing that Andrew was as lost as he was. For the first time, Tyler saw something vulnerable in the man before him. This wasn't just a rich, powerful man. He was someone who had also been searching for Emily. In that moment, Tyler realized they might need each other to find her. Andrew sat down heavily, the weight of his past settling on his shoulders. Tyler stood there, unsure of what to do, watching the man who seemed to have it all, yet was clearly haunted by something he couldn't fix. "She never told me she had a son," Andrew said, his voice quiet, almost like he was talking to himself. "If I had known..." Tyler's emotions were all over the place. Part of him wanted to shout, demand answers, but the other part of him saw the pain in Andrew's eyes. This wasn't just a rich man who had lost a lover. He was someone who had also lost something important, someone who had been searching, just like Tyler. "You loved her," Tyler said, the statement half question, half observation. Andrew nodded slowly, his eyes misting over. "More than anything," he replied. "We were supposed to build a life together, but then everything fell apart." "What happened?" Tyler asked, his voice barely a whisper. Andrew sighed, running a hand through his hair. "There was an accident," he began, his gaze distant. "I was in the middle of expanding my business, and I had to travel constantly. One day I came back and she was gone. No note, no goodbye." Tyler felt a knot tighten in his chest. That sounded just like his mother, disappearing without a trace, leaving behind only questions and heartache. He knew the pain of abandonment all too well. "I looked for her everywhere," Andrew continued, his voice thick with regret. I even hired private investigators, but it was like she vanished off the face of the earth. Tyler's mind spun with possibilities. Had his mother been running from something? Was there more to this story than either of them knew? So you just gave up? Tyler asked, his tone harsher than he intended. You never found her? Andrew shook his head. I never stopped looking, he said firmly, but after a while the trail went cold. This picture, it's the only piece of her I have left. Tyler felt a flicker of something, hope, maybe. They were both searching for the same person. Maybe, just maybe, together they could find her. Tyler stared at the photo, emotions swirling inside him. This man had loved his mother, but he still didn't understand why she left. And if Andrew, with all his wealth and power, couldn't find her, what hope did Tyler have? A lump formed in his throat. Could he trust this man? Was Andrew telling the truth? Or was there something he wasn't saying? What do we do now? Tyler asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. He had always been on his own, used to figuring things out for himself, but this was different. This was bigger than anything he'd ever faced. Andrew looked up at him, his expression serious. I think we need to start searching again, he said. If she's still out there, we'll find her. But I need to know something first, Tyler. How did you end up here, homeless? What happened after she left you? Tyler hesitated. He wasn't used to talking about his past, especially not to someone like Andrew, but there was something in Andrew's eyes that made him want to trust him. After she disappeared, everything fell apart, Tyler began. We lost our home, and I ended up in foster care. I tried to find her, but I was just a kid. Andrew listened intently, his brow furrowing as Tyler continued. When I got older, I ran away. The system wasn't helping, and I figured I'd be better off on my own. Tyler swallowed hard, trying to keep his voice steady. I've been on the streets ever since, but I never stopped looking for her. Andrew's face softened. I had no idea, he said quietly. I'm sorry you had to go through all of that. For the first time, Tyler saw a genuine kindness in him, a warmth that made him think maybe this man wasn't so different from him after all. We're not so different, you know, Andrew added, as if reading Tyler's thoughts. We've both been searching for the same person, carrying the same burden. Maybe together we can find the answers we've been looking for. Tyler wasn't sure what to say. Could this man really help him? Could they find his mother after all these years? He didn't know, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he wasn't alone. Tyler still couldn't shake the strange feeling that had settled in his chest. Standing here in this lavish estate with Andrew was something he never could have imagined just hours ago. And yet, here he was, talking about his missing mother with a man who had once loved her. The world felt upside down, but one thing was clear. They had to find her. I need to know more, Tyler said, his voice firm. If she's out there, we need to start now. He clenched his fists, the determination clear in his eyes. Andrew nodded. We will. But first, let's make sure we have everything we can from what you found in the wallet. Andrew retrieved the wallet from the table and began going through it again, checking for anything that might have been overlooked. Tyler watched him carefully, his heart pounding with a mix of hope and fear. As Andrew flipped through the remaining contents, he found an old receipt. This is from a cafe downtown, Andrew said thoughtfully, showing it to Tyler. I used to take Emily there all the time. Maybe it's a place she still goes. It's a long shot, but it's worth looking into. Tyler's mind raced. Could his mother really be that close? Could she have been living nearby this entire time? We should go there, Tyler urged. Now, before the trail goes cold again. His voice was filled with urgency, the thought of losing her again, unbearable. Andrew agreed, grabbing his coat. Let's go, he said, his tone decisive. The two of them left the mansion, an odd pair, one a homeless teen, the other a wealthy businessman, both united by their search for a woman who had left a mark on both their lives. As they drove toward the cafe, Tyler found himself glancing at Andrew from time to time, wondering what his life had been like. "Do you think she still loves you?" Tyler asked, breaking the silence. It was a question that had been gnawing at him. If his mother had loved Andrew so much, why did she leave? Andrew sighed. "I don't know," he admitted. "I hope she does, but it's been so long and I've changed. Maybe she has too." His voice was tinged with sadness, a man who had everything but still felt the weight of loss. Tyler didn't respond. He didn't know what to think. All he knew was that they had to find her, no matter what. The car pulled up outside the small cafe. Its sign faded from years of use. Tyler stepped out, heart pounding, as Andrew followed close behind. It felt surreal being here. Was his mother just on the other side of that door? Tyler's hands trembled slightly as he reached for the handle. "Ready?" Andrew asked, his voice steady, but his eyes filled with the same nervousness Tyler felt. Tyler nodded, pushing the door open. The smell of coffee and pastries filled the air, and the place was cozy, with a few regulars sipping their drinks. Tyler's eyes scanned the room, searching for any sign of his mother. But all he saw were strangers. "Can I help you?" a waitress asked, coming up to them with a friendly smile. Andrew stepped forward, showing the picture from his wallet. "We're looking for this woman. Have you seen her?" he asked, his voice calm but urgent. The waitress looked at the photo for a moment, then shook her head. "I'm sorry, I don't recognize her," she said, and Tyler's heart sank. Another dead end. They had come all this way, and for what? The hope that had burned so brightly just minutes ago began to flicker. He turned to leave, but then... "I've seen her," an older man said from the corner, his voice rough and gravelly. Tyler and Andrew spun around, eyes wide. The man was hunched over a cup of coffee, his eyes tired but sharp. "She used to come in here years ago, always sat by the window." Tyler's breath caught in his throat. "Do you know where she went?" he asked, his voice desperate. The old man shook his head slowly. "No, but she stopped coming after a while. Last I heard, she was living out in the suburbs, working at some office job, quiet lady, kept to herself." Andrew's eyes met Tyler's. It wasn't much, but it was something, a new lead. "Thank you," Andrew said, pulling out his wallet. But the old man waved him off. "No need," he said. "Just hope you find her." Tyler felt a renewed sense of purpose. It wasn't over yet. "We should check the suburbs," he said to Andrew, his voice gaining strength. "If she's still out there, we can find her." Andrew nodded, his determination matching Tyler's. They weren't giving up now, not when they were so close. As they left the cafe, Tyler glanced back at the old man, who gave him a nod, as if wishing him luck. Tyler's mind was racing again, but this time, it wasn't with fear. It was with hope. The drive to the suburbs was tense, the weight of the moment pressing down on Tyler and Andrew. Tyler's mind raced with possibilities. What would he say if he found his mother? What if she didn't want to see him? His stomach churned with a mix of excitement and fear. Andrew, too, was quiet, his thoughts hidden behind a stern expression. After what felt like hours, they pulled up in front of a modest apartment building. Tyler's heart pounded in his chest as they stepped out of the car. This was it. This could be the moment he had been waiting for all his life. They approached the front desk, where a receptionist greeted them with a polite smile. "Can I help you?" she asked. Andrew, holding the photo tightly in his hand, spoke up. "We're looking for someone who might live here. Her name is Emily. Do you know if she stays in this building?" The receptionist looked at the photo and frowned, clearly trying to remember. Tyler held his breath, the silence unbearable. "I think I've seen her," she finally said. "She lives on the 3rd floor, apartment 305. Tyler's knees nearly buckled. She was here. His mother was just a few floors away. Andrew placed a steadying hand on his shoulder, sensing Tyler's overwhelming emotions. "We'll do this together," Andrew said quietly, his voice offering comfort. They rode the elevator in silence, the hum of the machinery the only sound. Tyler's mind raced. What if she didn't recognize him? What if she had moved on and didn't want him in her life anymore? The thought terrified him, but he had to know. The elevator dinged and the doors slid open. Tyler and Andrew stepped out onto the third floor, the hallway stretching out before them. Apartment 305 was just ahead. Tyler's hands trembled as he reached for the doorbell. The seconds felt like an eternity. Then the door creaked open, and there she was, Emily, older but unmistakably the woman from the photograph. Her eyes widened in shock as she saw Tyler standing there. "Tyler," she whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. Tears welled up in Tyler's eyes. "Mom," he whispered, his voice catching in his throat. Emily stood frozen in the doorway, her eyes darting from Tyler to Andrew and back again. The years had aged her, but to Tyler, she still looked like the mother he had remembered, older, wearier, but the same warmth in her gaze. "Is it really you?" Tyler asked, his voice cracking with emotion. Emily's hands trembled as she reached out, gently touching his face, as if to confirm he was real. "My boy, my sweet boy," she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. Tyler stepped forward and they embraced, the years of separation melting away in that single moment. Emily's body shook with quiet sobs as she held her son close. Tyler didn't care about the questions that still lingered. He had found her, and that was all that mattered. Andrew stood a few steps back, watching the reunion unfold, his own emotions tightly held in check. He cleared his throat softly, catching Emily's attention. Her eyes widened as she recognized him. "Andrew," she breathed, stepping back slightly from Tyler. "I didn't expect... I never thought I'd see you again." Andrew nodded, his expression serious but kind. "Neither did I," he admitted. "But here we are. Tyler found my wallet and, well, it led us to you." Emily's gaze softened, but there was a flicker of something, guilt perhaps, behind her eyes. "I had to leave," Emily said, her voice wavering as she looked between them. "I had no choice. I never wanted to abandon you, Tyler, but..." She trailed off, her emotions too raw to continue. Tyler's heart pounded in his chest. He had waited so long for answers, but seeing the pain on his mother's face made him hesitate to press her for more. "Why, Mom?" Tyler finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you leave me?" Emily wiped her tears, taking a deep breath. "There are things you don't know," she began, her voice shaky but determined. "Things I never wanted you to be part of." Andrew stepped forward. "Emily, whatever it was, we can face it now. Together," he said firmly, his eyes locked on hers. Emily looked at him, her lips trembling as though she wanted to say more, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she just nodded. The reunion was bittersweet, filled with love, but also the heavy weight of the past. Tyler could feel it in the air, but for now, he was just grateful to have his mother back. Whatever secrets she had been keeping, they would deal with them together. Tyler sat across from his mother in her small living room, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken words. He could hardly believe he was here, looking at the woman he had longed to see for so many years. But now, the questions that had been festering inside him were rising to the surface, demanding answers. His hands clenched into fists as he fought to keep his emotions in check. "Why didn't you come back for me?" Tyler finally blurted, his voice raw. The words came out sharper than he intended, but the hurt in his heart was too deep to soften. "I looked for you. I waited. I thought something terrible had happened to you." Emily's eyes filled with sorrow as she reached for his hand, but Tyler pulled away, the anger bubbling up inside him. "You just left without a word. Do you know what that did to me?" His voice cracked, and suddenly all the pain he had been holding in for years came rushing out. "I'm sorry," Emily whispered, her voice trembling. "I never wanted to hurt you, Tyler. I had no choice." But her apology didn't soothe the ache in his chest. Tyler stood up, pacing the room, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "No choice? What does that even mean?" Tyler demanded. "You just disappeared, and I had to figure everything out on my own. Foster care, the streets. I thought you were dead." His voice broke on the last word, and for a moment, the room was silent. Andrew watched quietly from the corner, his expression unreadable. This wasn't his moment to step in. This was between Tyler and his mother. Emily took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "There were things I couldn't protect you from, Tyler," she said softly. "I thought by leaving I was keeping you safe." "Safe from what?" Tyler shot back, his frustration clear. He had waited so long for this conversation, but the answers he was getting felt incomplete, like they were just scratching the surface of something much deeper. "What could have been so bad that you had to abandon me?" Emily looked down, her fingers trembling as they gripped the edges of the couch. "There were people, dangerous people, who were after me," she finally admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I thought, by staying away, I could protect you. I didn't want you to be caught up in my mess." Tyler stood still, absorbing her words. It didn't erase the pain, but it gave him a glimpse into the fear she must have felt. He still had questions, so many questions, but for the first time, he began to understand. The room felt smaller, heavier, as Tyler processed his mother's words. The idea that she had left to protect him clashed with the pain of her absence. His anger simmered, but now it mixed with something else, understanding. He sat down, his eyes searching her face for more answers. "Who were they?" he asked quietly. "These people you were running from?" Emily sighed, her shoulders slumping. "I got involved with the wrong crowd," she confessed. "It started with debts I couldn't pay back, and things spiraled out of control. They threatened to hurt you if I didn't disappear. I thought leaving was the only way to keep you safe." Tyler's jaw tightened. It made sense, but it didn't make the years of abandonment any easier to swallow. "You could have told me," he whispered. "I would have understood. I wouldn't have blamed you." Tears welled in Emily's eyes. "You were so young, Tyler. I couldn't risk it. I thought, maybe someday, when things settled down, I'd come back for you, but it never felt safe enough." She wiped at her face, the guilt weighing on her. Andrew, who had remained quiet, spoke up. "You should have told me, Emily. I could have helped you." His voice wasn't angry, but there was a clear undercurrent of regret. "We could have faced it together." Emily glanced at him, her face a mixture of sadness and something else, regret perhaps for shutting him out. "I didn't want to drag you into my mess, Andrew. I didn't want to ruin your life, too." She turned back to Tyler, her gaze soft but filled with pain. "But I see now that I made the wrong choice. I left you when you needed me most." Tyler swallowed hard, emotions tightening in his chest. His mind was spinning, torn between the anger he had carried for years and the love he still felt for his mother. "What now?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Where do we go from here?" Emily reached out, her hand hovering in the air for a moment before it landed on Tyler's. "We move forward," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I want to make it right, Tyler. I want to be in your life again, if you'll let me." Tyler stared at her hand, the warmth of her touch familiar yet strange after all this time. He had longed for this moment, and now that it was here, he didn't know how to feel. But deep down, despite the anger and the pain, he knew one thing. He didn't want to lose her again. The air in the room felt lighter, though the weight of the past still lingered. Tyler glanced from his mother to Andrew, unsure of what the future held, but feeling a small flicker of hope ignite inside him. He had spent years searching for this moment, finally being reunited with his mother. Despite the pain, there was something comforting in knowing the truth, however difficult it was to hear. Andrew stepped closer, his gaze shifting between them. "We can help each other now," he said, his voice calm but filled with determination. "We don't have to face any of this alone anymore." His words held promise, a way forward that none of them had considered before. For the first time, Tyler didn't feel like he was shouldering everything on his own. Emily nodded, her eyes still misty. "We can be a family again," she said softly. "Maybe not the way we imagined, but we can try." Tyler felt his throat tighten at the word family. It was something he hadn't dared hope for, and yet here it was, being offered to him. Slowly, he nodded, accepting the possibility of a future he hadn't thought was possible. As the evening went on, the conversation turned from painful confessions to lighter memories. Emily shared stories about Tyler's childhood, little moments he had forgotten, but that she had held on to all these years. Tyler listened, the sound of her voice soothing some of the hurt that had festered inside him. Andrew joined in, sharing his own memories of Emily, stories from their time together before everything fell apart. Tyler couldn't help but smile at the way they bantered, their connection still evident after all these years. It was strange, but in that moment, it almost felt like the family he had always dreamed of. "I missed you, Mom," Tyler admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Every day." Emily reached over, squeezing his hand gently. "I missed you too, more than you know." There was a long pause, the silence filled with the warmth of their shared emotions. For once, it wasn't awkward or strained, it was peaceful. Andrew leaned back, watching them with a soft smile. "This is a new beginning for all of us," he said quietly, as if reassuring himself as much as them. "We've all lost time, but we have a chance to make it right now." Tyler nodded, feeling that glimmer of hope grow stronger. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. There were still so many unanswered questions, so much to work through. But for the first time in years, he wasn't facing it alone. The next few days felt like a blur, a strange mixture of emotions, as Tyler, Emily, and Andrew navigated this new reality. Tyler found himself slowly growing more comfortable in the presence of both his mother and Andrew. Though the years of distance and pain still left their mark, it wasn't perfect, but it was something, a beginning. Tyler spent more time at Emily's apartment, each visit filling in the gaps of their shared past. She would tell him stories about when he was little, moments Tyler had forgotten in the fog of his childhood. Emily's voice would soften when she spoke about how much she had missed him, her regret hanging between them like an invisible thread. One afternoon, while they sat together over coffee, Emily placed her hand on Tyler's. "I know I can't erase the past," she said, her voice steady but emotional. "But I want to be here for you now. I want to be the mother you needed back then." Tyler's heart clenched. It wasn't easy to forgive, but hearing her say those words made a difference. "I don't know if I can just forget everything," Tyler admitted, his gaze fixed on the table, "but I'm willing to try. I want to know you again, Mum." His voice was quiet, but filled with sincerity. He meant it. He wanted to rebuild what had been broken, even if it took time. Andrew had been a constant presence as well, offering quiet support. He hadn't pushed himself into their moments, but he was there when Tyler needed him. In a way, Tyler had begun to see Andrew as more than just the man who had loved his mother. He was someone who genuinely cared about both of them. "I want to help you too, Tyler," Andrew said one evening as they sat together in his office. "You've had to survive on your own for too long. You don't have to do that anymore." Tyler had never had someone say that to him before, and it stirred something inside him, a sense of belonging he hadn't realized he craved. They began to form a bond, something unspoken but real. Andrew wasn't trying to be a father to him, but he was there, offering guidance and support in a way Tyler had never experienced. It felt strange, but good, like a puzzle piece clicking into place. As the days turned into weeks, the tension that had once filled the air began to ease. Tyler found himself laughing more, sharing more about his life on the streets, and slowly, the bitterness that had once consumed him started to fade. They were becoming something new, a family, albeit an unconventional one. But there was still a part of Tyler that couldn't let go of the past entirely. He knew that forgiveness would take time, but for now, he was content to let this new bond grow. It was fragile, but it was real, and that was enough for him. Just as life seemed to be settling into a new rhythm, a phone call changed everything. It was Andrew's private investigator, the one he had hired years ago to search for Emily. He had called with news that left Andrew speechless. He hurried to find Tyler and Emily, his face pale with shock. "We need to talk," Andrew said, his voice trembling slightly. Tyler and Emily looked up, confused by his sudden urgency. "It's about you, Emily, and someone else." Emily's brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice cautious. Andrew took a deep breath, steadying himself before continuing. "The investigator found something, a detail I missed all those years ago. You weren't just running from dangerous people. There was someone else, someone who's been looking for you." Tyler's eyes widened. "Who?" he asked, feeling a knot form in his stomach. What could this mean? Had they missed something crucial about his mother's past? Andrew hesitated for a moment, then spoke. "Your father, Tyler," he said softly. "He's still alive. He's been searching for both of you for years, just like I have." The room fell silent, the weight of Andrew's words sinking in. Tyler's heart pounded in his chest, confusion flooding his mind. "My father?" he echoed, barely able to process what he had just heard. "But you? I thought you were—" Emily's face turned pale, her eyes wide with shock. I didn't know he was still looking for us," she stammered. "I thought he had moved on, that he'd forgotten about us." Her voice was filled with disbelief and guilt. Tyler felt a whirlwind of emotions, anger mixed with curiosity. All these years he had believed his father was gone, either dead or indifferent. Now, to hear that he had been searching for them, it was too much to take in. "Why didn't you tell me?" Tyler asked, his voice rising in frustration. "Why didn't you ever talk about him?" He couldn't hide the hurt in his voice. This was another part of his life that had been kept from him, another piece of the puzzle that he hadn't even known existed. Emily's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know what to do," she admitted. "Your father and we had a complicated relationship. I didn't think he would ever come back for us. I didn't want to get your hopes up." Tyler stood there, feeling as if the ground had been pulled out from under him. He had spent his whole life searching for one missing parent, and now he was being told that the other had been searching for him all along. The revelation hung in the air, heavy with years of lost time and unanswered questions. Tyler's mind raced, struggling to process everything. His father, the man he had thought was gone forever, had been searching for him. Anger bubbled up inside him, anger at the lies, the secrets, the stolen years. But beneath it all, there was a flicker of something else. Hope. "What now?" Tyler asked, his voice quieter than before. He wasn't sure what he wanted, or how he felt about this new piece of his life falling into place. "Where is he?" Andrew stepped forward, sensing Tyler's uncertainty. "He's been living out west, but the investigator gave me his contact information," Andrew said. "We can reach out. It's your choice, Tyler. We'll support whatever you decide." His voice was steady, offering Tyler the control over what came next. Emily's hands trembled as she reached for her son. "I'm so sorry, Tyler," she whispered. "I never wanted to hurt you by keeping this from you. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I was wrong." Her voice cracked with emotion, the guilt evident in every word. Tyler turned away for a moment, grappling with his emotions. The boy inside him wanted to scream, to let out all the frustration and pain he had bottled up for so long. But the young man he had become knew that this was an opportunity, one he couldn't just walk away from. "I need to meet him," Tyler said finally, his voice firmer now. "I need to know who he is. I've spent too long wondering, and if he's been looking for me, I have to see for myself." He looked up at Andrew and Emily, determination flickering in his eyes. This was his decision, and he was ready to face it. Emily nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I understand," she whispered, "and I'll be with you no matter what. We both will." She glanced at Andrew, who gave a small nod of agreement. Tyler took a deep breath. It felt like everything in his life had been leading up to this moment. Every hardship, every unanswered question. He had found his mother, but now there was another chapter waiting to be written, one that involved the man who had been missing from his life for so long. Andrew stepped forward, placing a hand on Tyler's shoulder. "We'll contact him," he said, his voice calm and reassuring. "But this time we'll do it together. You don't have to face this alone." Tyler nodded, his heart racing. He had no idea what to expect, but for the first time in a long while, he felt like he wasn't walking this path by himself. There was a glimmer of hope, faint but growing, lighting the way forward. The days leading up to the reunion were filled with a strange mix of anticipation and anxiety. Tyler couldn't stop thinking about what was to come. The meeting with his father, a man he had only known in fragments of memory. Every question he had ever asked himself about his father's absence was about to be answered. But would those answers bring peace or more pain? On the morning of the meeting, Tyler stood in front of the mirror, staring at his reflection. He barely recognized the person looking back at him. The boy who had spent years surviving on the streets was still there, but now there was something more, a sense of purpose, of belonging, even if it was fragile. Emily watched him from the doorway, her eyes soft with concern. "You don't have to do this if you're not ready," she said gently. Tyler shook his head. "I need to," he replied. "I need to know who he is. I've spent my whole life wondering." Andrew drove them to the small cafe where the meeting would take place. Tyler's stomach churned with nervous energy, his mind racing with thoughts of what his father would be like. Would he recognize him? Would he even want to be part of Tyler's life now that he had found him? When they arrived, Tyler spotted a man sitting at a table by the window, his back turned to them. Andrew placed a reassuring hand on Tyler's shoulder. "That's him," Andrew said softly. Tyler nodded, his heart pounding as they approached the table. The man turned around slowly, and Tyler's breath caught in his throat. He wasn't what Tyler expected. His father looked older, with lines etched into his face from years of searching and worry, but his eyes, those were the same eyes Tyler had seen in the mirror his whole life. "Tyler?" the man asked, his voice shaky with emotion. Tyler nodded, unable to find the words. His father stood up, tears already welling in his eyes. "I can't believe it. After all this time," he whispered, pulling Tyler into an embrace. The hug was awkward at first, but soon Tyler melted into it, the years of longing and confusion falling away. Emily watched from the side, her own emotions swirling as she saw the reunion unfold. Andrew stood beside her, offering silent support. Tyler's father pulled back, looking into his son's eyes. "I've waited so long for this moment," he said. "I never gave up on finding you." Tyler felt the weight of his father's words, but he also felt something else. Relief. The questions that had haunted him for so long were finally being answered. And though there was still so much to say, so much to understand, he knew that this was the start of something new. As they sat down together, the conversation began to flow. Slowly at first, but with every word, the distance between them grew smaller. Tyler smiled, feeling lighter than he had in years. He wasn't just the boy who had been abandoned anymore. He was part of something bigger, something that had been waiting for him all along. It was the beginning of a new life, one filled with hope, family, and a future he could finally see clearly.